The studio lights burned bright overhead, but they didn't carry the warmth to thaw the quiet frost settling between the two women seated across from each other. Pam Bondi entered first, every bit the veteran, hair sleek, voice buoyant, as she laughed backstage with the crew. She had stood on this set more times than she could count, and she always knew how to own it. Speak first, speak often, speak loudest. Jasmine Crockett came in later, silent and unhurried. She didn't fuss with her hair or tug at her blazer. When an assistant set a glass of water beside her, she only nodded and lowered her gaze to the blue folder in her lap. A folder she seemed to have read 1,000 times already, and closed only when she was ready to let its contents fly. Off camera, the air felt tight. Not the angry, barbed kind of tension, but a live wire charge, current humming, waiting for contact. The sound tech did one last check, murmuring to the director, "Both mics have been live the whole time." Nobody seemed to notice, or maybe, nobody cared. Everything in that room ran on cues and control, except for one person who understood exactly what was happening, and when the red recording light finally flickered on, only one of them knew the real show wasn't a debate at all. It was the accidental moment of truth, caught on a live mic at the worst possible second. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and hit subscribe, because what's coming next? Not everyone's ready to face what they just said out loud. They called it the Capitol table. Not because it was in D.C., but because words spoken here didn't just echo. They rang out louder than Congress itself. 4 chairs, 3 cameras, 1 perfectly polished round table. No space for chaos. That day's studio sat in a new facility in Atlanta. LED lights balanced just enough to feel half inviting, half political. Cameras programmed to track whoever had the strongest voice. The auto mixing system gave volume to continuous talkers. Those who hesitated were simply lost in the background. No one said it, but everyone understood. Some mics don't just record, they amplify. Pam arrived early, familiar walk, familiar presence. She adjusted her cuff so the watch peeked out, greeted the director like an equal, joked with the audio crew, even learned the makeup artist's name. Then she leaned in, all practiced charm. "Miss Crockett, right? She's still the quiet type, I assume." The tech just smiled, offered no reply. Jasmine entered later, alone. No handler, no aide. She walked in like someone who'd grown comfortable with being placed in silence, and no longer saw the need to break it. She greeted the crew by name. She remembered them all from the last time she'd been here. She didn't fuss about the lighting, didn't demand special framing. She sat, in chair 3, the blue folder always in her lap, and simply nodded when the director said, "Welcome back." A few meters away in the audio booth, veteran technician Nathan Boyd adjusted the input channels, frowning. Pam's mic was too sensitive. It caught even the whisper of her collar brushing against the earpiece, and if it could catch that, it could catch every secret in that room. Nathan had been in this job nearly 20 years. He could tell when a mic was built to clarify, and when it was designed to catch things that shouldn't be heard. He meant to swap the mic out, but when the production assistant overheard, she said softly, "No need. Leave it." Nathan looked at her and understood. Sometimes you're not meant to help the system run smoothly. Sometimes you let it trip over itself. The control room was hushed and heavy, like soundproof glass that could crack at any second. Director Marcus sat quietly, reviewing the show's rundown. Budget segments, culture flashpoints, federal policies. In the margins, a note from the higher-ups. Segment 3, let Pam lead. She manages pacing better. Nothing about Jasmine. Marcus didn't argue. He was used to this, just like he remembered 3 months back, when Jasmine's mic had conveniently died out right as she challenged a conservative senator over an education bill. Nathan had drafted an apology letter for that, one that never got sent. Pam and Jasmine had met twice before. The first time, Pam cut Jasmine off 6 times in under 4 minutes. On the 7th, Jasmine's voice stayed calm and low. The next day's headlines read, "Crockett loses control to former AG." The second time, Jasmine said almost nothing at all. When asked why, she said, "I didn't want to be a product of a script I didn't write." And the next day they called her unprepared. Jasmine she hadn't responded to any of it before, but today she brought the blue folder. Maya, the young production assistant, had once been formally reprimanded for not maintaining neutrality with guests. Her mistake was making eye contact with a black woman who was being mocked and refusing to laugh. Since then, Maya had learned to stay still, to not react, but she also learned how to capture what was never in the script. Today, she was the first to check the mics, and the first to confirm that Pam's mic was hot earlier than scheduled, without the usual soft filters. When the cue light turned amber 3 minutes before airtime, Director Marcus flipped through the rundown one last time. He noticed a sentence crossed out in the margins. If no drama, increase policy debate. No one planned to say that line, but everyone silently hoped for something to pop, not to uncover the truth, but to find something they could edit. In chair 3, Jasmine opened her folder for the first time. She didn't look at anyone. She just opened it, read, then folded it back. Pam noticed. She gave a faint laugh. "Brought your script this time?" Jasmine didn't respond. But Maya, 5 meters away, felt her palms go cold. Not from tension, but from knowing that today something would air that couldn't be edited out. The red light switched on. The cameras rolled. Everyone fell silent. But the room was no longer quiet. The host read the opening line exactly as written. "Welcome to the Capitol Table, where we bring political issues to the table of discussion." His tone was steady, but his eyes flickered between the two guests. Even he sensed that something about today was different. Pam Bondi spoke first. She nodded, smiled politely, and launched into her statement as if she'd practiced it in front of the mirror a dozen times. "We cannot keep indulging weakness in the name of compassion. The border is not the front gate of a church." Within 30 seconds, she had shifted away from policy and turned directly toward Jasmine. "I know someone here always likes to share personal stories, but this country doesn't need emotions. It needs action." Jasmine didn't flinch. Her hands stayed on the folder. The host invited her to respond. She nodded, her eyes still on him, not on Pam. "I believe this country is big enough to hold both policy and humanity. If emotion is a crime, then American history may need to be rewritten." Pam let out a short chuckle. It wasn't agreement. It was the kind of laugh that signaled the start of the second act. "Oh, history again. Funny how every time someone is asked for a concrete solution, we end up talking about ancestors." Jasmine didn't say anything. She tilted her head slightly. Pam continued, faster, more forceful, without waiting for the host. "I don't have a problem with people fighting for justice. I just don't like when pain becomes a personal brand." The air shifted in the room. Whether it was the lighting or Pam's voice, no one could tell. The main camera, programmed to follow the strongest voice, hadn't cut to Jasmine. It stayed locked on Pam, capturing every movement. And the mic, clipped to her lapel, was fully live. In the control room, Marcus glanced at Nathan. Neither said a word, but they both watched the audio waveform. Channel 1 was peaking evenly, catching even the sound of Pam swallowing. The host tried to redirect. "Thank you, Miss Bondi. Representative Crockett, your thoughts?" Jasmine opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Pam cut in with a line so soft it seemed meant only for herself. "Always playing the victim. We know this game." The words weren't broadcast loudly, but the mic picked up every syllable. In the control room, Marcus turned to Nathan. "Did you get that?" Nathan didn't respond. He just pointed to his headset. Inside the studio, Jasmine still hadn't spoken. She looked at the host, her eyes asking, "Did you hear that?" The host paled, not because of what was said, but because, for the first time, something that was supposed to stay off camera had slipped into the broadcast. Pam sensed the shift. She turned to Jasmine. "What?" "I didn't say anything." Jasmine didn't reply. She pulled out the first page from the folder. She didn't hold it up or read it aloud. She placed it in the center of the table, near the microphone. "I think the audience at home has heard enough," she said calmly. "The question isn't how I'll respond. It's how you're going to deal with a truth that just slipped through your system." Pam gave a tight smile. "Don't pull a morality stunt here." Jasmine nodded slightly. "I'm not performing, you are. And this time, the mic can't be edited for you." No one in the studio spoke. The camera operator tried to hold a steady shot, but the lens trembled slightly. Camera 2 slowly zoomed in on Jasmine's hand resting on the folder, outside the tech booth. Maya clenched her headset. She whispered something not meant for broadcast. This time, someone is listening. On social media, the live stream started to erupt. A Twitter account posted a 15-second clip. The caption flashed on screen just as Pam leaned in. Did she just say that on live TV? Within minutes, Unmuted America began trending. Another tweet read, Jasmine didn't need to raise her voice. The mic raised the truth for her. In a quiet Detroit cafe, an older black man nodded as he watched the clip again on his phone. Jasmine's stillness wasn't silence. It was certainty. The mic had already done the work. Her final words weren't a rebuttal. They were a period, not shouted, just final. And the audience felt it. An old chapter had closed. Pam tried to reclaim the moment. She turned to the host with a tense smile. I think there's been a misunderstanding. If the mic caught something it shouldn't have, but the host didn't look at her. For the first time in the entire broadcast, he looked only at Jasmine, and said nothing. No transition, no prompt. Jasmine opened her folder with quiet precision. Her left hand held the spine steady. Her right pulled out a single sheet of paper. She folded it into thirds and placed it neatly in the center of the table, squarely in frame. Camera 2 shifted with perfect timing. A close-up. The director whispered into the headset, Don't cut. No transitions. Let it sit. Jasmine placed her finger gently at the top of the page and slid it across the table to the host. Before we continue, I'd like to provide some context about how this debate is being managed. The host took the sheet, hands trembling slightly. He scanned the heading. A media strategy document. Internal. Originating from an organization where Pam Bondi served as strategic advisor. Top bullet points. Apply emotional pressure force the opponent to react if needed. Edit to simulate loss of control. Objective. Dismantle balanced image. Push sentiment toward extremity. Below that, a list of 3 names, all women of color, and beneath that, signature, Pamela Bondi final approval, 3 weeks prior. No one spoke. No dramatic gasp. No objections. Just one thing left the room. The ability to pretend. Pam exhaled sharply. I've never seen that document before. Maybe someone used my name. Jasmine looked directly at her. It was sent from an internal address. The IP has been verified. The timestamp matches a Zoom meeting you attended. If needed, I can provide the source. Pam's voice cracked. You're fabricating this. It's a trap. The media is being manipulated. Jasmine said nothing. She didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She closed her folder. Calm. Final. Like shutting a box that no longer needed to be opened. The host cleared his throat. Is there anything you'd like to say before we move on? Jasmine turned slightly. Just enough to face the audience. No smile, no tension. I didn't come here to prove I'm right. I came to show that some truths get dismissed just because they come from a voice people aren't conditioned to trust. The silence that followed traveled, outward from the lens, into the control room, and beyond. At that exact moment, the clip of Pam whispering, always playing the victim, hit 500,000 views. Folder of Truth began trending. A civil rights attorney tweeted, Jasmine didn't need to raise her voice. She laid down a piece of paper and made the country look in the mirror. Back in the studio, Pam said nothing. Her hand rested on her lap, fingernails digging into her palm. Camera 3 zoomed in. Her expression no longer matched her words. She forced a smile. I think we should move on. This wasn't part of the agenda. Jasmine gently shook her head. Truth isn't part of the agenda. But it always arrives, right on time. Especially when the mic stays on. The host bit his lip, eyes flicking back to the sheet still lying untouched on the table. No one moved it. No one denied it. Then a voice whispered into his earpiece from the director's booth. This shot doesn't need background music. Silence. Hits harder. And it did. The silence lingered. Not just in the broadcast feed, but in the hallways of the studio, in the corners of rooms where conversations usually echo. At the back, in the audio bay, a man sat alone. Nathan Boyd, a sound engineer with 2 decades in live TV. He'd recorded thousands of hours of footage. Heated debates, tearful confessions, political theater. He knew the rhythms of what got cut, what got softened, what got silenced. He remembered once, 2 years ago, when a black guest had broken down while recounting her bullying as a child. Her breath hitched. Her voice cracked. A junior tech leaned in and said, "Let's mute that part. No need to overdo it." Nathan had nodded then. It was just the job. Clean it up. Make it palatable. But today he didn't touch a thing. Because some truths don't need amplification. They just need to be left alone. Nathan never forgot that night. Her name was Kenna. After leaving the studio, she had emailed him privately saying, "I didn't cry because I was being cut off. I cried because I knew they'd edit it out. And I was right." Since that day, Nathan didn't just record. He listened, to remember and to preserve the parts others wanted to erase. 3 weeks before this taping, Nathan had been reassigned to the Capitol table after the primary technician took emergency leave. While testing the system, he found a printed document on the office printer. It had no label, just the logo of a familiar media organization. The print approval tag read, P. Bondi. Curious, he opened it. It was an internal briefing. Instructions on how to handle emotionally reactive guests, especially women of color. Suggested tactics included: interrupt them intentionally, insert language implying they're unstable, raise background audio when their voices grew intense, and redirect them if they referenced history or personal experience. Nathan closed the document without saying a word to anyone, but he printed another copy and kept it. A week later, Jasmine Crockett was confirmed as a guest. Nathan mailed the document to her office through an unlisted inbox. No sender name. No explanation, just one handwritten line. "This is what they call training. I call it manipulation." He didn't know if she ever got it, until today when she laid that exact document on the table, under the studio lights, in front of millions of viewers. No one knew Nathan's name. No headlines mentioned the sound engineer behind the broadcast. But he was there, headphones on, eyes fixed on the audio monitor. And he knew this time he didn't dial anyone down. Elsewhere, in a small library in Chicago, a middle-aged woman replayed the broadcast. Her name was Kenna, the same woman whose volume had once been cut for crying. When she saw Jasmine open the folder, she placed her hand over her chest, not from emotion but from the realization that what she had written had made it back on air. She whispered, "Thank you for not letting it be deleted. Thank you for keeping the mic on this time." At the same time, an anonymous blog post began circulating in media circles. It read, "I was trained to fade out the music whenever a woman of color talked about pain. But today, the sound played, uncut, clear, undistorted. For the first time in years, I felt proud of what I do." There was no name at the end, just a symbol. By the next morning, Jasmine Crockett's office was flooded with hundreds of emails. One came from an unknown address. No subject, no message. Just a single attachment. A raw audio file of the entire show, unedited, uncompressed. The file was titled, Episode UncutTruth.wav. They didn't need to check who sent it. They just needed to save it. So if anyone ever asked, "How did you know the mic was still on?" Jasmine could answer, "Because someone chose not to turn it off." Immediately after the broadcast, the network scrambled to contain the fallout. The official replay was edited within 6 hours. Pam Bondi's whispered remark was scrubbed, the camera lost the feed when Jasmine placed the document on the table, and the episode was retitled, A Heated Exchange Between Two Prominent Figures. But it was already too late. Someone in the control room, no one knew who, had exported the raw footage before legal could request edits. The uncut clips spread like wildfire across TikTok, X, and Reddit. No editing, no filters, just 47 seconds of raw broadcast, Pam's whisper, Jasmine's steady hand on the folder, and that final line. "Truth isn't on the agenda, but it always shows up if we leave the mic on." Within 12 hours, the clip surpassed 2 million views. In a journalism class at NYU, the professor scrapped the morning lecture to play it and asked the students, "Does anyone here think this clip needs music or effects? Any added emotion?" The room was silent. Then a white student in the back said quietly, "This is the first time I've seen someone not defend themselves, and the system didn't even dare to strike back." The next morning, in a New Orleans cafe, two older men rewatched the video on a phone. One said, "We used to say you had to shout just to be heard, but she didn't even raise her voice, and the whole country still stopped." The other nodded, because this time, the mic didn't choose the powerful. It chose the moment. At Jasmine Crockett's office, she arrived for work as usual. No press conference, no interviews, no social media post. She just sat at her desk, and there, someone had left a small handwritten note. "Thank you for not letting them fade it out."